You know what I'm saying?
That
It's funny how they would make an audio sound to give you the illusion of somebody running fast.
Right.
I think it was just him being bionic.
But they didn't have technology. Now you got it. You look at the way the Flash runs. He looks like and you see shit just whizzing by him, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, our guy they made him look like he was in slow motion because he was so fast. They had to slow him down.
They had to slow it down. It's kind of ingenious. I ain't mad at it. Yeah. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of 15 Good Minutes. Coach B here with the fellas. Freddie, how you doing today, man?
I'm well. How about you guys?
I'm good, man. LB, how about you, man? How you doing, man?
Doing good. I got a good health report today. I went to the doctor, got my physical.
My man.
I'm
having a drink in honor of it.
Hey, I turned 45 in July, and so I have that test coming up. Mm-hmm. And so
it ain't that bad, man. You won't know. You won't even know what happened.
You will always know what happened.
Well, let me just say, you won't feel that it happened. Let me say it that way.
I think that's key, Freddie.
I don't want to talk about that.
That is true. And here's the thing. What I do want to talk about, it's like, so I want to talk about the NCAA portal as it pertains to basketball players, right? And this week, and for those of you watching or listening, it's actually today was the last day to go in there. So I'm gonna tell you what kind of tripped my wire on it, and then I'm gonna turn it over to ULB and then to Freddie. So there's this kid. His name is I say kid. He's 25. That's a whole different conversation about how old you can be playing in college now, but fine. There's a young fellow, 25 years old. His name is Chad Baker-Mazara, and Chad was on the Auburn team that lost to Florida in the NCAA finals. A good Auburn team, a really good Auburn team that was somewhere between first and third place all year long. Started 34 games, integral part of what that school does. Now, let me say this. This is his third school. He was at San Diego State, was doing well there, and then he was also at a JUCO. So what tripped my wire was Chad enters the portal, and I literally asked myself, and Freddie and I started texting about this, why? So because again, and I know, we were just talking about this before we started about showing our age and stuff, but I'm showing my age when I say it used to be that, you wanted to be at a school that was going to be a contender. Check. You wanted major minutes. Check again. And even in this case, he is a high dollar nil person. So when somebody leaves LB this environment to go into the portal, the probability of him getting back to the level that we saw him playing at a couple of weeks ago, slim to none. It's clearly all about the money. But the thing that really, garnered my interest was I found this out in this article on Fox Sports. He signed a contract prior to this year saying, if I do leave, I have to pay a portion of that back. And now he's basically making the school come after it. So it kind of puts Auburn in the sense like, well, shit, do I go after this 25-year-old and set an example? I would. Mm-hmm. Or, because, is the flip side of that it's going to hurt my recruitment process, blah, blah, blah. What are we doing if we can get to the point where you already getting over $1 million? Mm-hmm. You're playing at a championship level for a championship caliber coach. You're winning. And you're leaving, and you have a contract. So that's what kind of got me spun up on it. I'm gonna throw it over to you, LB, and tell me. Let me just say this too. I'm all for these guys getting what they deserve. I'm okay with that, but I'm of the mindset that this has gotten far out of control, and I don't know how to rein it back in. So, what say you, and what have you learned about all of this?
Well, I'm at a loss too for some of this stuff as well. I've never been this deep into nil until getting ready for this particular show. It's amazing to me how much money is being given, thrown, offered to these college and high school players that got kids that are coming out of high school. I don't even know where to start. So there's where I use CBS Sports. That was the website I use to get some of my information. There's another one called 247sports.com. I recommend that if you really want to see who the players are, what school they're going to, where they're coming from, that kind of stuff. What you will not find, at least let me phrase it, I have not been able to find exact dollar amounts to how much money, each individual kid or player is getting.
Right.
But what I did find out, there's over 2,000 players
in the portal.
2,000 players are in the portal. And what you got, 360, something like that?
I had 311, but it's
300 something. Well, the same article said, it was talking about some other stuff, and it said, and I quote, keep in mind there are another 340 Division I schools to account for. So, because they were talking about this, I'm going to get to this in a minute, the top 10, the 10 million, it's called the $10 million club. Let me just skip to that now. So these are the schools that are believed, and I say believed because none of this can be verified because everything is hush, super secret right now. So you have Arkansas, BYU, Duke, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, Michigan, North Carolina, St. John's, and Texas Tech. All of these schools, and I put in air quotes, are believed to have budgets more than $10 million for Neil. This is just for Neil getting players to come play for them. And that's why the quote I started earlier says, these programs either have $10 million committed already or are easily capable of reaching that total in roster building efforts by the end of this year's transfer cycle. Says they are 2025 whales of the portal, loading up most of the priciest players and drastically inflating the market in the process. I continue. Keep in mind, there's another 340 Division I schools to be accounted for. If you're a high major program and don't have at least $3 million, and some would argue $4 million at a bare minimum in nil reserves in 2025, you're in trouble. There's easily more than a dozen mid-major schools with north of $2 million in their piggy banks promised to their 2025-2026 rosters per multiple sources at that level.
That's those numbers you mentioned are for the program.
Yes.
Not one person, the program.
No, that's the
so
program.
You're saying you want to have at least 4 or 5 mil to even enter the conversation.
Yes, to try and build out your roster. So this Chad Baker guy, there's no other reason to leave other than money. There was in another article I read, which I don't have pulled up. They talked about it was a mid-major, because let me back up, folks. They never use names. Everything is anonymous. Anonymous coach told a story about an anonymous player that they were trying to recruit from a mid-major. They had offered said kid $500,000 to come play for their program. A week later, they found out, the kid didn't call them. They found out through the grapevine and through social media that the kid had went to another school for $1.5 million and didn't even tell the school that had already offered him $500,000 that he wasn't coming. Now, when you see that kind of discrepancy in money, in this article, they talked about the kid was in awe that they offered him, 3 times more than what he was offered from the original school. So I can't, this whole system is screwed up. I can't blame a kid. If I work for IBM or whomever, and somebody says, "Hey, I'm going to triple your salary," and I'm to do the same thing, okay, where do I sign? So I can't blame the kids for taking the money. But what they have created is I don't know how you get this back in the bottle, how you rein all this in. You're basically cutting out all the mid majors now are being pilfered to feed the big schools now because they got all the money. So where do we go from here with that?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I'm gonna leave with that for you, Freddie. Do you? Because I think what LB said there at the end, I've already come to that conclusion. If I'm an AD or a coach at a mid major, I'm hosed. Mm-hmm. I'm basically the farm system for the big schools because I got this sleeper of a talent. I got this Lawrence Brooks kid out here. Nobody heard of him. He'll come play for me at George Mason. Somebody's going to see him in the A-10 conference. The next thing you know, he's going to be gone to Duke. So what are you seeing with that, Freddie, knowing how, and again, what you and I were talking about earlier this week about Ian, going to St. John's, and he's just one. And oh, by the way, to LB's point, we can't substantiate actual dollar amounts. I just have it on really, really good authority that Mr. Jackson is getting $3 million from St. John's. So I want y'all to think about that for a second. When LB said what a program has to have to start, this kid's he's going for three. So my whole program is shot already if I'm a mid-major. So are you seeing the same thing, Freddie, or do you have a different viewpoint or spin on what you're seeing?
So, LB, name out those teams again.
Okay,
the 10, the one with the 10 million?
Top 10. These are Arkansas, BYU, Duke, Indiana, Kentucky, Louisville, Michigan, North Carolina, St. John's, and Texas Tech.
Saw an article also on CBS Sports just today, but it was dated. It was the link. It was posted from the 14th, which was last Monday. They had Michigan 8.4, Kentucky 7.6, Maryland 7.1, Miami 7.1, Iowa 6.6, Virginia 6.2, Washington 5.9, Creighton 5.6, Georgetown 5.5, Xavier 5.5. So obviously, some of these teams, based on the team that some of the big boys have come up a little bit. Obviously with BYU, with the number one kid, player in the country coming to them, obviously. But BYU was not on this list. So the point of the matter is, right? This is what I said years ago before, when NIL started. I hated it because it was no regulation. The NCAA said, federal government, whatever, says we can pay these players, yada yada. So the NCAA said we're gonna wash our hands of it since we can't control it and regulate. Now, on the flip side, you have, the argument that you would hear is coaches do it all the time. Coaches do it all the time, but coaches are also employees. Right. And so, but now these kids, they're not employees, they're independent contractors / mercenaries or what have you. Right. And so they have no real governing body to withhold them to any standards or anything as opposed to this coach. If I'm a coach and I'm getting $10 million a year, very few coaches can get $10 million a year and get fired, or resign and go get another job paying $10 million or more the next year. It just doesn't work that way, And so when I look at it, with this whole process, I think again, it starts to marginalize the mid-majors even more than they already were back before NIL, because we knew guys were getting paid and so on and so everybody knows this, whether or not they want to acknowledge it or not, but we know it all was occurring, right? And so now it puts more of a greater emphasis on coaching and development from a year-to-year perspective, because you don't know what your roster is going to look like the next year. 23 to 27% of entrants end up leaving in college basketball, end up leaving the game. End up leaving the game, right? Because you jump in the portal, you have nowhere to go. So back to that 23 to 27%, where
Hell of
do
a
you
risk.
fall?
Yep.
Where do you fall in, because guess what? These teams are only so in basketball. Football, it's probably a little bit broader, right? Football, because there's so many, but basketball, let's be real.
And who is telling you when you're in there? Is it that relative, that family member? Is it a coach? Is it some, who's in your circle that you trust enough to say, I'm leaping in there? And then by the time you say, no, I'm sorry, I want to go back, you say, sorry, we've already vacated your scholarship and given it to somebody else.
Yeah.
Fascinating topic. What I'd like to do at some point later in the season is maybe I want to try to get a spin on what this means specifically for those mid-majors, LB, right? You know what I mean? Like I want to carve that out and say, okay, what does a mid-major coach and program go for, knowing that, if I get too good of a player, can I blow my entire nil budget only to have this stud, leave to go somewhere else? I want to get into the the socioeconomic and business problems that would impact just the mid majors, and maybe another episode, because I'm fascinated by this, and to the point that we made at the start. Okay, anybody who's in there, today was the last day to get in, so we're gonna be paying attention to Freddie's numbers to see how many of that 28 to 30% end up on the street.
Yeah,
because like LB said, there's 2,000 of y'all in there. There's this many schools. Do the math, right? I don't get that. So yeah, that's all we got time for today. Running out of time on the big clock on the wall. But before we go, let me see if the fellas have something to say. Freddie, over to you, buddy. You got something to say today?
This Kevin Gates thing with LeBron. Savannah looked at him and it's all this stuff. Why you, Kevin Gates? I'm calling you out. Why you, as a grown man, worrying about how another grown man's wife is looking at him? I feel like Savannah, you know, she was with LeBron when he had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So she's secure in her position, in her place, in her relationship with LeBron. She's more
as she should
secure.
be.
Yes, as she should be, right? As she should be. She's secure. Again, and I found it interesting because I'm not a LeBron fan, but in this particular case, even with with the Bronny stuff, all that other stuff, I was against him with the Bronny, because guess what? Bronny probably could have signed with the Lakers as an undrafted free agent.
That's a whole different topic. I got 30 seconds to give it to LB before this thing cut us off, brother.
But for you to worry about why this man's wife is looking at him the way groupies, she don't have to. Because she know where he's going every night. She know where he's at every night. She's secure. So let it go. Leave this man alone. Let him hoop, and try to beat Minnesota tonight, because they got their ass whipped up, Saturday night. Lakers, LeBron.
See y'all next week.
Yeah, I'll hold on for next week.
There you go. Later.
Sorry, LB. I'm sorry.